Thank you for joining me for part 7 of our Neuro-affirming series. We're going to move on to book 2 today, Konnect 2, which is a fabulous book which explores so much more and is going to give you so much more valuable information about your autistic child. There's a lot in this book, and what I wanted to do today was actually just on page 5, we introduce kids to stimming. We don't spend a lot of time explaining it. I do explore it later in other books. But just for now, I wanted to give you a little bit of background information. So we're talking about relaxation on page 5, and we were talking about, things that we can do when we become anxious or overwhelmed, and, does this happen too often? And then we talk about, autistics having good ways to help us. We often stim to help us deal with what's going on around us. And then I give some examples of stimming there. And then I point out that everyone stims, but autistics are super good at it. And then we talk about what stims you have. So obviously you'd need to have an understanding of stimming to explore that with the child. So I thought it would be a good exercise today to share 2 slides with you that I use a lot of the time when we're training schools, explaining what stimming is. So basically, I'm going to run through this. And we do have some other videos on YouTube, on our YouTube channel as well, Awesome Training YouTube channel, if you want to have a look at those. So stimming is a human response to the environment. That's one way to describe it. It's also a way of creating balance between what's happening on the outside world and our inner world. So it comes from self-stimulatory behavior, which I think shows a lot, doesn't it? Well, I often think, what if the experts who were studying autistic children, very small groups of them, might add, what if they noticed our stims, or the stims of those children? And what if they said, wow, they're doing like these repetitive movements. That's really interesting. It's actually kind of like the repetitive movements we're all doing. They might look a little bit different. Why are theirs a little bit different? And what are they doing? What are these stims for? I often think, what if they'd ask those questions instead of pathologizing autistic kids and their stims and saying it's bad, and all the stuff that has, those ideas have led to children not being allowed stim, children being, suppressing their own stimming, all sorts of terrible things. And it's a pity that's not what they saw. Instead they saw, oh, they're just stimulating themselves. And that very idea shows exactly, I think, the attitudes towards autistic children at that time, which, we're moving away from. We're now far, far away from the start of all of that. So let's move on and let's progress and let's understand that stimming is such a wonderful human activity. I'm going to keep these little series short, episodes short, so I'm going to go through this kind of quickly. But as I said, if you want to know more, there's a good few videos on our YouTube channel. We also have a lovely 2-hour course on autism and stimming in our on-demand section. If you really want to get into it and learn some more, definitely check that out. So as I said, it's a human response to the environment. We all do it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a very, very human thing. So there are different types. So vocal stimming would be things like making sounds, obviously, or singing the same verse of or the chorus maybe of a song over and over and over. Maybe it is humming or things like throat clearing. And then there are physical stims, and physical stims are, anything we do with our bodies, basically. So that can be rocking or pacing or flapping or any of those things. Mental stimming is really interesting and it doesn't get a lot of coverage. I just have a really good example. I suppose a colleague of mine would present, can literally deliver a talk and listen to music in their head at the same time. And I think that's a wonderful example of mental stimming. We could probably go as far as to say that dreaming is a form of mental stimming, but then that's quite complex and we don't want to start explaining that today. Auditory stimming is obviously listening. So that's where, we like listening to certain sounds or relaxing music, or, maybe we get great comfort and joy from listening to the same song over and over, or the same sound over and over. And we can mix up our stims, obviously, because you can make a physical stim can make a sound. So then that becomes a physical and auditory stim together and all those kind of things. Tactile is obviously touching, so rubbing, or even just the way you might just find yourself doing something like this and it feels so nice. That's a tactile stim, or rubbing your cat. And visual is, I use examples to explain this. Basically, you know, you can get those sensory toys for kids where they have like oil and water and, you know, dye and glitter and stuff, and they're like just really cool and really stimmy to look at. But you don't, you know, that's fine, that's cool for some people. But a really good example of like visual stimming for human beings in general is, you know, when people get entranced by the flames dancing in a fire. It's one of my favorites. Or if you stop to admire a view and the breathtaking view, you're like, wow, this is amazing. And the view on the outside world has a calming effect on your internal world, and or not calming, maybe it makes you excited, maybe it makes you full of joy. It has an emotional effect, and that's what I mean when I talk about the balance. So there are lots of different types of visual stims and different things that people do. And olfactory would be sniffing or smelling, and kind of doing that repetitively as well. So they're the different types. So, you know, that's how you can explore with kids when you have at least an idea of the types. And then the functions, and I'll run through these again kind of quickly just to keep this short for you. Don't want to be overloading anyone today. So different functions, and I suppose soothing, as I said, you know, that feels really nice. Babies do it quite naturally. Repetitive sucking action to soothe them. We also pick up babies and we rock them. Two really good examples of stims, normal human being stims. So why we don't pathologize disease, why would you pathologize other ones? Makes no sense, does it? And that's us actually sharing a stim, which is kind of cool as well. So we can also share our stims. Yes, sometimes we do use our stims, or we have stims that stimulate us, like if you rub your eyes when you're tired or your foot falls asleep, you start banging it off the ground to remind, to tell it to wake up. We also use stims to express our emotions. So you might see kids, you know, expressing their excitement like this, or you might see somebody, you know, covering their face or rubbing their face if they're stressed. We also use it to communicate, and this is something that's really interesting and really needs to be investigated in more depth, how autistic people communicate more, you know, through movement when we're together, when we're around each other. Really fascinating. I have had experiences of it where I've seen autistic people like stimming and I've understood it, but it's not a word language. It just, I know what they meant, but it's not something I can translate into words. Again, definitely beautiful area for someone to research and spend a bit of time investigating. So fascinating. Taking in information, processing information, and storing information. I'll put those three together. So doodling is a really obvious example for me. When I was in secondary school, I used to doodle a lot on all my books, and that, I didn't know this at the time. It was just something I naturally did. It's only an adulthood in the past 10 years, finding out I was autistic, learning about stimming, and then obviously learning about my own stims. That's what I was doing when I was doing all the doodling. I was taking in the information, I was processing it, and I was storing it. So it wasn't just helping me to concentrate. It was actually more than that. It meant that I was filtering through what the teacher was saying, filtering out what I didn't need to learn, and taking all the new information and processing it. And then I was obviously attaching it to all the other things, and that's how my mind works, to all the other, you know, things that I know in relation to that. And I was storing it. So when someone's, and this is important, because if someone told me to stop doodling, well, they basically told me stop listening, stop processing, stop learning. So, and then also recalling information, and some really human examples of that, or when we click our fingers, what's that word again? Somehow this movement actually triggers our memories. Again, huge, beautiful area for anybody who'd love to research it. It's so fascinating. You know, likewise, if you walk into the kitchen and you forgot what you came in for, you open the fridge door and you're like, what did I need? You might say, okay, I'll just retrace my steps and then I'll know. And then we do that and it jogs our memory. So that repetitive movement that our body's doing somehow jog our memories. And that's really interesting, that relationship there. So, you know, it's important that you have at least this sort of knowledge to be, I suppose, supporting the autistic child and to discover their stims and talk about them, and you know why they do them and what they're for. The joy of stimming, it just feels good sometimes, just feels nice. Now I do have extreme stims noted here. I think it's really important that if somebody is exhibiting you know, behavior, I hate that word because it's so negative for autistics, but if they're hurting themselves or somebody else, that's not to soothe themselves, stimulate themselves, express emotions, communicate or learn, or any of those things on the other side of the slide. That's a sign that the autistic person is really suffering and their needs are not being met. And that's where we need to, I suppose, be the investigators and find out what's going on in their little lives, so that we can help them. And that's why it's important to look at as behavior, as communication, rather than just saying, oh, that's bad behavior, good behavior, you know, or something that we need to change or redirect. Try and understand, you know, I always think if that's what we're seeing on the outside, you know, if you understand stimming, I suppose, and the things I've said in summary, to be fair, but that it is about creating that balance. So if something on the outside can affect us internally, likewise, we have to maybe leave out some of the stuff that's going on inside us. And I just think if that's what you're seeing, if that's what a person is expressing on their outside, well, we really need to stop and think and try and investigate and see what is causing them to feel like that on the inside. You know, and if we start looking at communication that way, we see a lot more, we learn a lot more, and we can help people a lot more as well. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you next time. Cheers. Bye.